Hey, what's up everybody? We are painting a mountain today. I hope you guys are all doing well on this Saturday of quarantine. This is the mountain we'll be painting. It's Mount Shasta, which is near where I used to live the last I don't know, 4 years before moving to Humboldt County. So, Mount Shasta is pretty epic. You can look it up on Google and read about it. It's known as the root chakra of the earth. It's a very spiritual place. And it's north of Redding, California. It stands 14,000 feet tall by itself. Just like a mountain volcano just standing there. Hey Laura! She's painting with me again, 3 weeks in a row. So, I primed my canvas orange, and I'm gonna go ahead and flip it around. I just want to say hey to everyone. So, here we go. Okay. The past few weeks I've talked about color and how I lay my paints out, so I'm going to go ahead and do that again. Laura, if you could answer me on how the sound is. Is the sound good with the music and all? It'd be dope. Okay, so I've been talking to you guys in the last few videos about my choice of colors that I use. And you can go ahead and use your basic yellow, red, blue as your primaries if you'd like. I move my primaries around the color wheel to a cyan, magenta, yellow color scheme. And I also, instead of using one yellow, I'll use two. One that's more toward the greens and one that's more toward the oranges. So I'm going to lay my colors out just like I usually would here. And if you guys are painting with me like Laura is, go ahead and prime your canvas light orange with just orange paint and water it down. Yeah, you want it to be like a transparent orange. You're just priming the canvas. And I'll explain why later. But to give you an idea of the paints I use two yellows. So one is more limey. And one is more warm and sunshine-like. Okay, so there's my two yellows. My two reds, instead of using a basic red, I'll use one that's a red-orange and one that's more of a magenta. So, here, I'll show you guys. This is cadmium orange and permanent magenta. So if you're using a pack of paints, just try to get something close to these. And there's about a million blues when it comes to art, but today I'll be using ultramarine blue. And I'll be using cobalt blue. This one's by Arteza, comes in this little squeezable pouch, which is kind of cool. So, while you guys check that out in relation to the color wheel here, I just also want to talk about acrylic paints and their makeup. So they're a polymer-based paint that mixes with water. So it's a water-based. So is watercolor, obviously. Oil paints are not. So acrylics are nice and easy to learn with because you can cover things up and they're opaque. You can thin them down. It's kind of like when you have tempera paint for kids. That washes out. Acrylic doesn't wash out as well, but they're the same sort of water-based paint. So it's the easiest, I think, to learn. A lot of people learn in watercolor as well, which is great. For me, watercolors are a little bit harder because I'm very sloppy and tactile. So you want something along these lines for colors. Two yellows. Try to get one more limey, one more sunshine-like. Two reds, one more orange, one more purple, and two blues. One toward purples and one toward greens. Then you're going to want a white. So a nice basic white is a titanium white. And if you guys are buying paints to do these classes, I recommend this brand because it's a good budget brand and it's still a good quality. It's Liquitex Basics. And then once you run out of these, you can bump up to these Winsor Newtons, which are really juicy and nice. Another brand, if you guys are looking at paints to buy, Golden Acrylics is going to be very expensive, but very, very nice. And so I'll get little tubes of their stuff just for details. And they also have a line of iridescent paints. I don't know if you can see that, but this shimmery silver. It's really fun to play with the light in your painting toward the end using some of their iridescents. Alright, and then for a painting substrate, I like to use these economy packs of stretched canvas. This is 11 by 14. You can get a pack of 7 of these for really cheap at Michael's. So, yeah, that's what I use. I use a reusable water cup. This one's just an aluminum cup I got at Wondergrass a few years ago. And it's always good to have a color wheel around, so you can either make your own, or you can print one out or buy one. I also really like this one because it has a value scale on it. And so we'll talk about value today, but that is the difference of light to dark and everything in between. Which brings me to why I prime this orange. The reason is I'm not staring at a bright white surface that blinds me and makes it hard to figure out relationship values and all that. Instead, I've primed it, and you can see this orange would probably fall somewhere in this region. So it's more of a middle tone. And orange is the opposite of blue, green, purple, all these colors that are going to be in my mountainscape. So this is, again, Mount Shasta, and this is what we're going to get after today. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to figure out how to compose this painting, the shapes and where they lay on the rectangle. We're going to break up those big shapes, figure the values out, and go from background, middle ground, to foreground. And during that, we'll be taking some breaks to let things dry. You can use a hair dryer, a heater, stick your painting outside, and just watch me demo the next part. Yeah, also, sometimes a beer or a glass of wine is nice to have around, especially because it's Saturday. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and start laying this out. So this is how I lay out my colors. I just use a little bit at a time, and I try to make these piles all stay nice and clean. So they, you know, they're the raw material, and then I can mix on a different plate, so I'm not contaminating these piles. It's really important to do that because you're going to make a bunch of colors out of these. So these colors are our tools. And I'm laying them out just like the color wheel so my brain can see that. I used to just like squeeze paint wherever, but really if you set yourself up for success like this, you're going to learn a lot more about color theory, which is half of the ball game. So, yeah, if you guys have questions as we go, just comment and hopefully I'll see it. Let's see what Laura says. Okay, thanks Laura for letting me know. It sounds good. You also want to wash your brush often when you're using any type of paint. Because if you have orange in your brush and then you go and start using these colors, it's going to dull it down to like a brown. And we don't want that. We want nice, clean, bright colors. If we want to dull something down, we'll be doing it purposely. Another trick, sometimes I'll put my white on a different plate because if you get white into any of these colors, it's going to make it pale. And your whole painting will end up being like a middle range. We really want to have the difference of light and dark in our paintings. And we also really want to have the difference of cool colors and warm colors. So we'll get into that. So this is how I'm starting out. Color wheel, my 6 colors, and my white. I have tons and tons of different other colors that I've bought over the years, and I really do like introducing them at times. But what I found is you get pretty confused color schemes, whereas if you use a limited palette like this, you'll have a more harmonious color scheme. For example, here's the painting we did last week, and you can see how all the colors work together there. Okay. Brush-wise, I really like to at least have a large, a medium, and a small. There's all kind of different brushes. I'll show you just a couple examples. This is a flat. This is a round. This is a filbert, curved on top. This is an angled. And this, where it's straight across and short, this is called a bright. So yeah, there's all kind of brushes. Get a nice little variety going for yourself. Maybe have a paper towel on deck. And this type of pack is really nice to buy. That way you've got some fresh little small ones in there for detail too. All right. Okay, I'll keep this here so we know what we're doing. This is one of my paintings. It's actually hanging in Trinity Brewing Company in Weaverville, which will be opening post-quarantine. My art will be hanging there, which I'm stoked on. Our friends are starting that brewery. First one since Prohibition in that county. Okay. Alright, so first things first, we have an orange canvas. We've set ourselves up. I'm going to take a medium-sized brush and I'm going to map out this composition. So, the number one thing when painting is when you think about your composition, there's going to be a focal point. It's where your eye is drawn to. And usually when you're doing a rectangle, you want to break this rectangle up in an interesting way. So by putting the focal point dead center, say the focal point is, you know, the peak of the mountain. By putting it in the dead center, we would be breaking this up in a really weird way. We could do it. I mean, you can do whatever you want. But I'm going to show you how to break this up with the mountain still being, you know, it's a mountain. It's the main thing. Usually I'd push my focal point off to a side. But I think today I'll center the mountain itself with the peak somewhere in the thirds area. And since it's about the mountain, I'm just going to be okay with it mainly being in the middle. The thing about painting mountains is if you are trying to paint a specific mountain, you just really want to mimic the exact shape of the top and like how the edges come down. So if you'd prefer to paint a different mountain like Mount Hood or, you know, Mount Bachelor, or whatever mountain you prefer, that's fine. You can Google search your mountain to paint from that photo. But just really as we paint, try to get the top to look exactly like whatever mountain you're painting. Today it's Mount Shasta, and it has this little peak first called Shastina, and then the large peak. And actually they say it looks like a woman laying down from a certain angle, and I think that's pretty interesting. So I'm going to be focusing on the shorter peak on the left and a taller peak here, and then also the angle at which it comes down. So we are going to get a little water, and with acrylics, they come out of the tube pretty thick. We want to thin them down a little bit, but not too watery because we need to let things dry. So I'm going to start out with something also orange, but a little bit darker. And I'm going to first make a mark where I want the top of the mountain to be, which again is not going to be dead center, but over a little bit with enough room for a sky. And I'm also going to look at the angle at which this comes down. And this is just an underpainting sketch. Something like that. And then I'm twisting my brush as I do this because this is rock up here. It's not going to be perfect. The more organic, the better. So Shastina, the small peak here, is slightly lower than here. So now I can make a mark as to where I want that. And then there's a teeny another little peak there. And it's like a swooping, a wide U there. And then this is kind of straight down, a little peak, and then this swoops right down. So just try to make sure you have your angles somewhat similar to me here. Or again, if you're doing a different mountain, you want your angles of the mountain and the top of the peak to look like the mountain you're trying to paint. Hi, Mom. Hi, Grammy. So, if you're painting along, just remember this is going to be a little swoop. Sammy, chill out. Go on. Okay. All right, so we've got the peak of the mountain here. And then we'll deal with all of this later. But for now, I want to go ahead and get this tree line mapped in. The one thing about this, you don't want to just abruptly stop your tree line. You want it to look like it keeps going. Okay, so that means that we want to make it look like we've only captured what's in this frame. It keeps going. And so to do that, I'm going to have the peak of this tree here. And I'm going to have the peak of this tree here. And the only thing I really want to make sure of is that they're not equally tall. Well, I have one a little taller than the other. No. He just went to the... And then I'm just going to put another tree here. Another tree here. And this tree line is kind of falling down a hill. So this is just a rough sketch, but make it like an interesting shape here, where it kind of frames your mountain, such as this. And just see what kind of interesting shape you can get in here. When doing mountains and hills, a lot of times your brain wants to just make it like a hill. Well, it's not very interesting if you just have something that looks like this. And then again with your tree line, it's not that interesting if you have a tree line that's like this. So make it interesting. Twist your brush while you do it to loosen up a bit. All right, so from here, we could go ahead and do a value study. I don't know if I'm going to do that today just because I don't have a lot of dry time. But if you wanted to, you could come in with a dark orange or dark red and map in kind of where some of these darker lines would be. And you could also fill in this whole darker area here with orange. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and do it. It'll dry fast enough. So this technique of doing an orange underpainting, there's a word for it. I don't really know what the word for it is, but a lot of artists and a lot of oil painters actually do this first. An orange underpainting. So these shapes here are kind of V's. I'm thinking about the contour of the mountain. So this comes down and then this comes down. So this is an under drawing to get the shapes. Right here you can do upside down V's going up toward that main peak. This is like a face that then falls that way. And once you have a few of these main guiding lines in, you can just kind of look at your painting and try to figure out what makes sense for yours. Everybody's paintings will be different. This area in here is going to be darker with trees. Little tiny trees because they're far away. If you live with dogs and you're painting with acrylic, make sure you don't get any dog hairs in your painting. And then we're looking at this. This light orange is going to be the lightest value, and that's going to be the sky, where the light's coming from. The second lightest part of the painting is going to be the snow. And then the trees, and then this far away area is going to be shadowed. Also, maybe instead of this tree line coming down in a V, we push it off into one area. And since this mountain's taller, or the mountain's taller on this side, maybe we push it down to this. Something like that. Okay, so again, this is just the underpainting, the underdrawing, just to guide us. It acts like a map, so we don't have to figure out placement as we go. We can just paint. Could also have like a little walkway in here if we wanted. I kind of like that. It gives us a focal point in this thirds region like I talked about. So that's the area that we're going to bring focus to with this little walkway. Alright, so this is the underpainting. This is just a drawing, essentially, what's underneath. So we're going to let that dry. Yeah, let that dry for a minute, and we'll talk about mixing up a sky color. But before I place the sky color on, I got to dry all of this, or else these reds and oranges will mix into the blue and gray it down. Alright. So, if you just chimed in and you're trying to paint along, this is Mount Shasta. You can paint whatever mountain you want. You can paint along with me if you want to do this one. It is a volcano in Northern California with a large peak, and then this teeny little peak next to it's called Shastina, but it's all Mount Shasta. It's a 14,000 foot volcano that just comes up like that. So the important part when doing mountains is to get your peak lines to match the mountain that you're trying to paint, so it reads as that mountain, and that includes the angle at which the mountain comes down at. So if I had this, you know, swapped around or coming down more abruptly, it wouldn't read as Mount Shasta anymore. So if you want to do Mount Hood or Mount Bachelor or whatever mountain you want, just try to mimic the top of that mountain. Alright. So hopefully this dries kind of quick. You can use your blow dryer or whatever you have at home. Your heater. Do you know where my art blow dryer is? No. Ooh. Whoa. Super needed that. Alright. This is a good time for a smoke break. This is a good time to clean your water brush after your little orange session here. You can send me pictures at this point if you want me to see where you're at. I can help you figure your shapes out before we really get going. Ooh. There we go. It's a little easier to see. Alright, so this is our orange underpainting. And again, we do that because now we're going to be using these colors. So I challenge you to actually let little bits of that orange pop through. I don't know if you guys can see this, but these little bits of orange right here, this is what I like to go for. Even in the mountain. Because the fact that the orange is an opposite from the colors I'm using, it really makes it pop and you get a lot more depth. Alright, so I'm just letting this dry. In the meantime, I'm going to turn this around and say hey again. Hey, just finished working for the day. Oh yeah. There's Bob.
Hello, everyone.
So, yeah, this is our little humble abode. Here's Samson with his new leg brace. There's Miss Delilah. Here's where we are on the painting. Mount Shasta today. Hopefully. Man, this light. I gotta get this light looking better. You know where an extension cord is, Bobby? Like a little one? Yes, Laura. That looks so good. I love it. Look, she's been painting with me every week.
Nice.
Killing it. Dude, it looks amazing. I think you did great. You definitely followed directions well. Little Miss Productive. Killing it on her jog. And now her art class. Amazing. Love it. Alright. Okay. Is your sky dry? Mine's pretty dry. I'm going to go for the sky color now. So I'm going to rinse my water out. Are you hungry? Should we have a pizza? Okay. Okay, cool. Alright, so I'm taking white for a sky color. I'm going to mix up a good amount of white. And basically, this is how you know you have enough water in your paint. It's moving around like this. When it comes out of the tube, it's pretty thick. So you want it moving like this. And if it's too watered down and won't cover your canvas, then you've got it too thin. So I've got white, a little bit of cobalt blue. Oh, that was a lot of it. You want to remember that your sky and the white of the snow, that's going to be your lightest parts. And so everything in painting is relative. So if you've got this darker blue sky, that's okay, but everything else is going to be in relation to that. It's going to be darker. So this is your chance to get a nice light area of your painting. And we want to go for that value scale of light, medium, and dark like we talked about. So go ahead and get this pretty light. And then as it gets closer to what would be the horizon line, it's going to get more grayed out. Here we don't have a lot of sky, so it's not as big of a deal. But if your background's dry, go ahead and do this. If it's not, just wait. Sometimes if you've mixed something up too dark, you can just use what's in your brush already and add white to that, like this. And you don't have to make your, you don't have to go so perfectly. You can kind of scribble it in and you'll get little bits of that orange popping through. And you can also edit the shape of your mountain here. So by painting the sky, I'm also negatively painting the mountain. Same with this tree line. And one trick to make it look like it keeps going off the page is don't abruptly end it, or don't have something hanging off the edge. Like if you're gonna have something being cut off, which you want at least half of that object on the canvas usually. So like half of a tree. And then make sure too, when you're working on a canvas like this, you wrap it around the edge, because that way you can just hang it when you're finished. Okay, whoa, that was an accident. Sometimes I do like darker corners, so I'm just gonna roll with this. Need more white up in here. If you want to make your sky all crazy like I accidentally just did, go for it. I'm gonna use the dark I accidentally put on there and just kind of have fun like scribbling the sky in. So yeah, I'm just getting this base layer. Don't add as much water. I accidentally did, and it's not covering well. If you want to go all like Van Gogh and do swirlies, you can do that too. Alright, I'm definitely going to come back in with another layer, so don't mind what mine looks like, but I think what happened to me is I had a little orange in the brush still. Hopefully yours is looking a little more clean. Alright, and then what you can do too is while you have this color on your brush, you can go ahead and put like little bits in here. You don't want to cover anything totally up. But it's really nice to have a color carry through multiple parts of the painting. So I'm just going to put little highlights in parts of the mountain. So that's like some lighter highlights. And again, interesting shapes. So you want to use your brush, maybe twist it. Just think of the faces of the mountain. You can also think about where the sun is. So we would probably need to choose a direction of the sun, which I think would probably be this way, just because of how the trees are. So these faces of the mountain can get a lighter color. All right, and then don't get too carried away because we want to let things dry. So I'm going to go ahead and let things dry for a second and let you guys see where all that is. So go ahead and cover your sky. You can have brush strokes going in interesting ways up there. One thing to make sure of is that you don't have any weird blotches or shapes dead center of your painting anytime that you're painting, because that'll make your eye jump straight to the middle. Our goal is to get your eye to kind of go through the painting, maybe like down this walkway and then like up through the mountain. So get something like this down with your lighter color, and then rinse your brush and get new water. Fresh water. All right, this is getting dry. Laura's sending a picture of what she has so far. Resume. We're back? Okay. All right. So we're back. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get some contrast in here. And by contrast, I mean we've got some nice light colors in here. And now we're going to go dark. So I'm looking at the darkest part of the painting, which is going to be this far away area that probably is a bunch of trees. But we're not going to focus on individual trees. We're going to focus on an overall color. So I am going to mix up some of this ultramarine blue. Okay, and I don't hardly ever use paints directly out of the tube. You totally can. You'll get nice, bright, vivid colors, but I usually mix a little something. And a lot of times when things are far away, they're shadowed. So I'm going to add a teeny bit of my magenta. So it's ultramarine blue and permanent magenta that I've mixed up. So it's darker blue and my more pink red. Hey, everybody. And I'm going to take this color and start slapping it into this area. Oh, this is so fun. Hello, everyone. So I want to go for some of these darker shapes to get a darker value so I can really start to see what's going on here. So first, just get used to painting in a bigger shape and holding your brush more loosely. So like this. And allow yourself to have the opportunity to really scribble in there. Okay, it's somewhat of a controlled scribble because you already know the shape of your area. And again, it's not about individual trees. It's about the vibe of all those trees really far away. So I'm not using too much water. I'm mixing blue and my magenta. And I'm getting a nice dark color. So this is a great time to let these little bits of orange pop through and not fully cover up things like that. So, again, interesting shapes. You don't want to come in here and just make a weird oval. Like, not at all. So these are actually, it's a forest of trees that's far away. And again, as I paint this shape, I'm also negatively painting this shape. So I don't want to come in here and just have weird swooping things. Honestly, it's really helpful to just kind of be, I don't know, I don't want to say angular, but see these edges? Like, I don't know, it just makes it more interesting versus if I was just like, look at this edge. Like, this doesn't make sense. This makes more sense. Alright, so I'm just mixing up more of that. It's an ultramarine blue and a magenta. And I want like a purple. So when you're doing that, if you add too much magenta, it's going to be a fuchsia color like this. Which that's fine too, especially if you want to have like a variation of these purples. Could be kind of fun. But really, cool colors are going to recede. So this is like the furthest away part of the mass, really. Because this just keeps, like, I guess this could be like going down into a valley or something. So yeah, I want it to be more of a bluish purple, and I'm going to add a teeny little bit of white, which be careful, because look, that is so much lighter. But you can get a few different variations of purple going on in here. Just know that more blue purples are going to make it look more distant. And then the way that it comes up into the mountain here can work in your benefit. So I'm going to go ahead and make some of these darker shapes. And I always make things really organic, so I'm trying to put like little bits of edges and things. I don't know why, but that's my new goal lately. I think the edge with the real organic shape kind of makes it, I guess, look more finished in a way. I don't know. That might just be me. And then, you know, it's a deep, faraway area that then rises up. So these trees, they only grow at certain elevations. So it doesn't grow all the way up the mountain. So you got to think about that. Like, this tree line is it's not a hard straight line, but it kind of gradually is ending in the same general area. And that is an elevation thing, and then also the snow. Snow's not going to be all the way down here. So if you think about that while you're painting it, you will make it make more sense than if you're just slapping it on there. So it also could be helpful to do some of these little tiny, tiny little marks up here. We usually do way small stuff toward the end, but I think it's important to get little edges in the mountain now so you can see the shape of it. And for all this kind of stuff, you can go back and forth between different purples. I think having a variation of color in there really adds to it. Something like that. And then you can always like turn your brush so it's skinnier and do some little bitty edges here that could read as like the tree line. Let little bits of that orange pop through though, because it's going to be cool later, I swear. Alright, so the focal point too, where this walkway is going to fall away and be distant and vanish eventually, it's good to have a really dark mark there too. So go ahead and put some thick blue paint. And once you have this general shape made, you can get all crazy and funky with how you actually finalize it. You can get thicker paint in there. One thing is you want it to work with your focal point. So we have these trees coming down into here. So maybe this stroke right there, dead center, didn't really do a whole lot for me. So I'm going to actually just use that as a place to come in with these little marks as trees. Make it swoop like that. You can spin your brush around and like scribble some like zigzags for treetops in there if you want. Kind of nice to reveal the orange background there. That's kind of fun. I did this painting a few years ago, so this one's definitely going to be a little different. A little more technique. Something like that. And again, the cool thing about acrylics is you can cover stuff up later. So don't cover everything up. Let little bits of all the layers pop through, and then whatever's not working, you can either add to or take away from later. Change your brush stroke up too, like turn your brush strokes. As long as you're working in a way that they all kind of bring you down to this lower point, that's kind of what you want. I'm going to add a little bit of white now and just get more variation. Not too much white, but just little hints. Again, that helps with, like, you can think about the sun's coming from this way. So maybe there's, you know, some trees being hit with light right here. And like my painting mentor says, it's not about the tree, it's about the trees. So you're just creating this illusion. And you don't have to paint little baby trees. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm just using my brush in a vertical motion. You can cross your eyes a lot too, and that helps you not look at every little detail. It's more about the overall shape of things. Okay? Something like this. This is a good time to get texture in there, and again to let little bits of that orange pop through. And you can also take this and find more places on your mountain that might have a little darker spot, maybe where the rock's exposed. There's really no right or wrong. There's just thinking about surfaces and like how things flow. Okay. All right, I'll be right back. I'm gonna let this dry, but if you are painting with me, get some variations in your blues and your purples here. You want more bluish purple, less fuchsia, but get it like a few different variations and just have fun with your brush strokes, having them all kind of swoop you down to this point. This walkway is gonna bring us into the painting, and the way that this meets down here is gonna bring us through the painting. All right, I'll be right back. I'm gonna let this dry, get new water. I'll be right back. if you still have purple left over, after you do all of this, same as usual, you can kind of slap some of that into here. And again, especially with this, we are going to want little bits of that orange popping through. So you could use this to kind of make some guiding lines as to where your trees might be. Be careful to not equally distribute them. Your brain will put them all the same spacing if you're not careful. And also we want to think if the light's coming this way, then it's going to be lighter here. We might have kind of a shadow up underneath in our walkway here. And yeah, you don't really want this swoop, so make this an interesting shape. I also like usually for the corners of my painting to be a little darker. Kind of brings your eye in. Edges too. So I'm just using the extra paint on my brush to kind of bring that together. Alright. Sky's not quite clean yet. Or dry, I mean. Alright, we're going to wait on this to dry, and we're going to lay in some serious white on the mountain itself, remembering that the sun is coming from this direction. So, another painting mentor of mine once told me to put orange in my white, and I was like, what? But it makes sense now. So, orange will make everything really orange quickly. So I have just the teeniest amount on the smallest brush, and I'm going to put it next to where my white is, and I can tell that's going to be a lot. So I have a tiny little dab there. And I'm just going to scoop some white and mix it into that, and I want it to barely be orange. This is just a warm white. And I have a very small brush, and I'm thinking about the sun coming from this direction, so I'm going to go ahead and just add little touches of warm white. I know that the sun's going to be hitting this plane. I know that the sun's going to be hitting here. And really, it's just about like squiggly shapes, some hard shapes, and the balance of those things, and the balance of warm white and cool white, which will be the more purpley white. That's how we're going to get a three-dimensional shape to read. The difference of warm and cool, the difference of light and dark. So just think about your faces here, like this, where the upside down V's are. That's going to be a face coming down toward the sun. Like that. And little spots that are getting hit by sun that might not make sense because it's a rock face up there. So just try to keep in mind that the sun is coming from this direction. Like right here, this teeny little slope's gonna have something. And you just want to do little bits. We're not coming in here and just plasting a bunch of white on there. We're going to have different variations of white. Right now, this one has a touch of orange in it. And again, you want to think about the snow and where it stops. So the lowest part the snow is going to be is about here. You can decide on your own painting where it's going to be. Everyone's is going to be different. I still have plenty of opportunities to let orange pop through. And now I'm going to add, if you have any more of that purple left or any of the blue from your sky, Add a tiny bit of a cool color such as blue or purple that's already mixed up, and then do the same thing, but notice that this will be the next shade darker. So I'm just going to do areas that are still getting sun, but I don't know, maybe a little less. It's hard to explain. I just kind of go for it. You can always change it up. This side maybe. And let your orange show through in plenty of places still. Interesting shapes, twirling of your brush. All right, now, while everything dries, hopefully you don't need to redo your sky like I do, but I just got to do it. Alright, so problem solving, skies. I did what I told you guys not to do, and I had a little bit of orange in my brush when I painted my sky. So I want a much more clean sky than this. I also had a little too much water in there. It's kind of hard to get set up and get started. But anyways. Okay, so I've got plenty of white. I'm adding a little bit of cobalt. And I'm going to add a touch of fuchsia to gray it down. Okay, we'll see what ends up. Oh, I kind of like that. It's like a periwinkle. So I'm just going back over my sky. If you feel like doing this as well, go for it. You could also wait till later. Mine, I just cannot stare at it any longer. I need to redo it. I'm wrapping the paint around the side. And as you paint your sky, you are also changing the shape of your mountain if you want, and also your tree line. See here, I'm able to edit the shape of this. I'm just like scrubbing it into the canvas. It's one color. Alright, that feels better. Alright, so I've got my baby blue sky going. Again, when you mix skies, I was always taught to add a teeny bit of red in it. Just the smallest bit. Alright. So I have the sky color mixed up again, and I'm all about layers and variation. I'm going to go ahead and put a teeny bit of this. Just like little hints of it in my mountain area. Okay. All right, now we're gonna mix up some greens to really fill this area in, and then we're gonna come back into this. So here's my colors again. And here's the color wheel. So we laid out colors in the same way as the color wheel. And I've used a little bit of cobalt for the sky and a little bit of ultramarine for down here. So I want to show you guys a thing on mixing greens. I actually had a whole class on mixing greens once. Let's see where Laura's at. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to mix on a new plate just to show you guys this. And I'm going to let this dry and we're going to do some studying here. Okay. So here's the color wheel. And here's the colors I'm using. So when you mix green or when you mix yellow and blue, you get green, right? This is all going to be green trees. However, there's many different greens. There's yellow green, there's blue green, there's, oh, here's one of my favorites, green gold. Can you see that? It's a good one. That's not in today's colors, though. Today, the yellows that we're working with are cadmium yellow and cadmium yellow deep hue. And the blues I'm working with are ultramarine and cobalt. So instead of just having a yellow and a blue, where I get one green, I already have several different mixtures I can do here. We're going to look at what happens with those, because this is a fun, nerdy thing to do while we let our thing dry. Alright, I've got fresh water, and I'm going to go ahead and do a fresh brush so that we make sure we're nice and clean for this. Okay. Maybe this one will do. Alright, so I just want to show you guys the difference of mixing with... Let's start out by doing two different yellows. So I'm adding some water, and we're going to use ultramarine blue in both spots here. So I'm going to have one pile with the lighter yellow and one with the more orangey yellow. So here's with the lighter yellow. We're going to get a more warm lime green type color. See that? Whoops. Come on, brush. Okay. And then with the more warm orangey type yellow, this is going to be a much, much different green. See that? I don't even know what color that is. There we go. It's nice. It's nicer, darker. So this is much more limey and bright. And the other one's much more earthy and dark. So here, I'm going to add even more blue so you guys can see another difference. When doing greens, there's several things that can be different about the greens. One is you can have a warmer green closer to yellow, or you can have a more blue green. Okay? So now let's mix. Let's mix. It's kind of hard to explain this because I just kind of like, I guess I just kind of like do it. So here we go. slightly out of order, but let's cover this one up. Okay. So these three greens, light, medium, and darker, were all made with my more limey yellow. Okay, so that's one challenge I want you guys to do, is use your limey yellow and make a light, a medium, and a dark. I should have put these in a row, sorry. You'll also notice that your darker one that has more blue in it is more cool. So you have lighter and darker, but you also have more warm and more cool. So mix up a few different greens. Maybe you have a little plate or something, and you actually end up mixing a lot of different greens. See how many different greens you can get, and try to get them to be different relating to warm and cool, light and dark. See all these greens I'm getting? These are all different greens. Okay, once you do that, we're going to take the lime green and we're going to put it on trees that are going to get hit by the sun this way. So, here. I'm just going to put little bits and then you guys can see what it does. Laura's painting is looking amazing. I love the like deep indigo blues you got going on. Yes. Okay, Laura, so for the blue, there we go. For the blues that you just put all up in here, go ahead and use what you have left of that and mix with your limey yellow as well. You'll get harmonious greens. That'll be a good starting point. So again, I want little bits of my orange to pop through as I go. That's just a preference. You guys don't have to do that, but it looks cool. And I'm going to go ahead and use warm, light green first. I'll probably come back in with it later as well, but you want to use kind of one at a time. So I'm just coming in here with some light yellow where the plants might be getting hit by the sun, which is coming this way. I guess it would make more sense to paint the dark in first, but I don't know. I like to see the light. Okay, here's a more cool, darker green. And I'm going to put this on the shadowed part of some of these trees. And again, it's not about a tree, it's about the illusion of a forest. So, as Luke says, it's not about the tree, it's about the trees. But I'm going to do this darker, cooler green, more blue green, on the left side of some of these, what will be trees, or shapes of trees. And maybe I'll even fill in some of this, because these trees are going away and they're blocked by these trees where the sun is. Sun's coming this way. So some stuff in here is going to be darker, and this is a really good opportunity to let some of that orange pop through, except for you don't want a dot of it in the middle. And also, it might be a good time to use very little of this green, but kind of like into this darker shape. Not all the way back there, but there's going to be these trees and then the far away darker shape, but there's also something in the middle. And so by taking this cooler green and overlapping into the purple a little bit, you get yet another variation of color, texture. Remember, things are smaller the further away they are, so tiny, tiny little shapes and strokes back here. It's almost like a repetitive pattern that just reads as faraway trees. I'm also going to use this cool dark green down up underneath. what will be these trees. Now I'm adding yellow and more blue. This is kind of a medium green. I really just mix up a bunch of greens, and I mess around with the warm light and the dark cool. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you have a difference in warm and cool, light and dark, that's where you start to get shape. If you feel like your paint's not covering very well, it's probably because there's too much water in your brush when you rinse. So go ahead and take this time to mess around with some greens. These are all different greens mixed with my different yellows and different blues. By adding more blue to your yellow, you're going to get a cooler, darker green for like more shadowed areas. And if you want areas of green that read warmth and light of the sun, you want to add a lot of yellow. I'll do a little bit more of this lime. And then I'm going to let things dry because mine got very saturated with water and things are not sticking as well right now. So if you're in that boat, just stop for a minute. Remember, you want your eye going down this path and through the painting, so having brush strokes that help lead the eye in, that's helpful too. Alright, I gotta stop myself. My water looks terrible. I need to rinse it. I need to clean all of my brushes. I need to get a drink of water. I need to make sure I'm not gonna like smear paint all over everything because I got some on the bottom of my plate. Alright, so yeah, just take a moment to not only wash but also dry your brushes. In painting classes like this, you want to keep things moving along because there's only so long to do it. So don't have too thick of paint applications till toward the end, and don't have watered down paint or things just won't dry. All right. This is where it's at. Costco. This is where it is at. Also where it's at. All right. Okay, at this point, hopefully you have some greens laid down in such a way that reminds you that the sun's coming from this direction. So warmer, lighter greens on this side of what will be the trees and this slope thing here, and cooler, darker greens on what will be this side of the trees, away from the light, being shadowed, as well as this part, because since the sun's coming this way, maybe these trees are blocking that. And then also using some of that darker green to overlap with this shape. Maybe it shows another layer that's between these trees and those faraway ones. Okay? So we are back. We're going to come back into the greens and have a lot more fun with those later. If you feel like you need to redo your sky, this is a good time to do that. I also think it's a really good time for us to finish this mountain. So if you do redo your sky, you know, you can... Yeah, do your sky. Redo your sky. If you need to redo it. If you don't, just leave her be. And then we'll place the mountain on top of that sky, because overlapping helps create depth, which is what we're going for. So I hardly ever use just white out of the tube. I'm going to today because I just want to. So we're going to go back and forth with a smaller brush now, using a white for snow and using a dark purple that I'm going to mix up. Okay, if you don't want this dark purple to be so bright, you can dull it down by adding a tiny touch of a yellow color. A tiny, tiny touch. So I have two brushes with different shapes going on, and I'm really paying attention to the darker parts of this mountain and also to my brush shape. So this one is a bright, it's really short and flat, and this one is a round. So I have two different shapes of brush that I'm using. Okay, I'm just gonna like do this and talk to you guys. So instead of outlining your mountain, the goal for what we're doing here is that we just want to have the background and then the mountain be sitting on top of it. So if you look at a photograph of a mountain, it's not going to have an outline. The thing on the very tippy top, if it's covered in snow, is going to be snow. So there's something called a broken line that we can use here, where maybe there's little touches of rock exposed on top that help somewhat outline bits of this. You just want to be like really dainty with it. You don't want a harsh outline. You just want like little tiny areas that have the dark. And you want each one to be an interesting shape of its own. You can have things overlapping some of the white you already have on there. I highly recommend not ever covering up an entire area. Like, leave the information that you've already put out there. Leave it there. You know, I cover some up. I leave some exposed. That back and forth is going to create some sort of interesting situation. Again, you're thinking about the shape. It's a mountain, so there's going to be crazy cliffs, and don't forget your snow is definitely going to end at some point. Just keep that in mind. And it kind of always also helps to just step away from your painting sometimes. You can add two shapes that are already there. Okay, and then I have white I'm working with as well. So you're starting to like fill this in. If you really like an area and you think that you figured the shape out, now add some white to that in an interesting way where it sits on top of the structure you've already made. This is just how I would paint a mountain. I'm sure there's other ways, but this way is kind of fun. There's something about twisting and wiggling your brush that really helps make it organic. For where your snow ends, it's not going to be an abrupt, hard line, so you know. Some slopes get hit by sun more than others. It's going to be gradual, and some cliffs, it might be too steep for the snow to sit. It's going to be all over the place. It's organic. But as you get closer to liking what you have, you can apply thicker paint so it really looks like the snow's packed on there and sitting. Notice here, this was that bluer white. Now I just put bright white on it and it really pops out. So remember what we did earlier? We had a little bit of a like pale blue, and then we had a white with just a tiny touch of orange in it. And now putting this bright white into the mix and playing with those, we're really getting some shape. Something like this. See, so I'm not outlining the mountain. So like this edge of the mountain meets the sky, and they definitely read as two separate things. Careful not to get into your green and smear it all over your mountain. We don't want green up in here. Every once in a while, step back. Make sure you don't have a weird something in the middle. See what it looks like to bring your mountain all the way to the sky. Maybe you've made a purple mark that's just a little bit too thick. Now you can come in here with white and break it up, but still use it or use half of it. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit of blue. Make kind of a medium light purple. You just add white to this darker color you were using. So this is like a medium color. We haven't used this yet in the mountain. We've mainly been going light and dark. So now this medium will be kind of like shadows. And use the broken line idea here too. You don't need something to be like a harsh line to make it read. Your brain will put it together. And then you can even lighten this up again so we get like a lighter medium yellow now. All about the variations. Just kind of have fun playing with shapes. And also how it ends. The snow. And you can look and be like, okay, yeah, I've got some orange parts sticking through here, but maybe it's too many. So you can start closing some of these orange shapes. This is kind of like where I really enjoy the painting telling me where to put things. You know, be aware that you're not doing too much with one medium color, but it's kind of nice to be like, oh, it needs broken up there. That's when the painting really is like a map, and you're just kind of going for it. Okay, I have to stop myself before I go too far, and that's one of the hardest things. Honestly, we've been working on this part for a minute, and I think everybody could benefit from just like stepping away for a minute, look at it from a distance. So, you know, we can always go back and do more, but you can't do less. So you can cover things up for sure, but just step away for a minute. You might come back and be like, oh man, I actually really like that. It also helps to put it up like horizontally and look at it from afar because you've just been looking down at it. So prop it up and then go look at it. You'll see things that you like. You'll see things that bother you. You'll see areas that need more shadow. Okay. Alright, so let's just go ahead and leave the snow how it is. Again, you can come back in later. I'm going to give you a couple minutes just to like resolve what you're working on. Notice I've still got this big orange shape in the middle, so I need to decide what's going to be snow and what's going to be trees. I do not want a giant orange shape in the middle. But I, right now, am going to do another layer on my foliage, whatever. So I'm going to use an angled brush. And I think I like the orange popping through on the walkway a little bit. So I'm just going to use the more limey yellow this time and a blue. Oops, I did the whole pile. And if it's too fake of a green looking thing, add a little bit of red. Don't forget to get like a warm color and a cool color going. Add a little bit of white if you want an even lighter warm. And we're going to do this again. Actually, I'm going to start with the dark this time. Sorry to be confusing. Okay. I'm starting with the more blue-green this time. It's very blue. It's very dark. Coming into this area up underneath, where there might be shadows, and this dark line is going to pull us into the painting. I actually really like that, so I'm going to go ahead and suggest that to you. It can be more squiggly if you don't want it so straight. And then I'm just kind of scribbling up, thinking up underneath trees. And again on the corner here. So, like I said, if you're going in on the second layer, don't totally cover up what's underneath. Make how this dark part meets that in a way that works with the walkway. And then, again, remember we were going to make that in-between tree line with like a blue, like a blue-green. So use this time to see what it's like to overlap onto this blue. And I'm just using a flat brush and zigzagging up and down. Letting bits of the purple pop through. Make sure you're wrapping it around and painting to the edge to make it look like the trees keep going. Same on the bottom. Cool. Now I'm going to my lighter green here, my lightest, and I'm gonna hug that right side of these trees. Now that I've got this darker cool really laid in here, you can see how the lighter sitting on top makes it pop. And I'm just kind of like using my brush in interesting ways. Dipping back and forth between the lightest and the medium, and really getting an interesting blend of greens. I'm like literally brushing like this all over the place with my brush. I'll go slower. It's really fun to challenge yourself to see how many different strokes you can get with one brush. And at this point, you don't want to be adding too much water to your paint. You want the paint to really stick and sit on top. Notice here when I put this lighter green on top of what was the darker back there, how it really pops out and that cooler green recedes back. You can also notice that I'm leaving the orange background in sections. I'm going to cover that one up. But like maybe this walkway it ends up coming through a bit. So yeah, we're just playing with warm and cool. We have thicker paint. That warm, lighter color sitting on top of a little bit of this darker green is doing something kind of cool. And then everybody's will be different at this point, but you can kind of look at it now and be like, okay, I can use cooler, more blue greens in here still. Things get smaller as they go away from you, so smaller brush strokes, bigger brush strokes. Same thing, don't overwork it here. You can always come back. Make sure you're wrapping around the sides though. Whew, okay. Now's a great time to clean your water. You don't want to bring green into any of this area. If you feel like this is too much of a blocked out shape, you can also take the back end of your paintbrush and scribble lines into it, like drawing elements. Might help with the trees. Maybe a little bush down here. Same here, you can scribble into there. I just really like to scribble. And then you get some of that orange popping through in kind of like a weird graffiti kind of way. Alright, so. Whew, it's getting chilly in here. I'm going to mix up a color that we don't really have in here yet for in this middle area and a little bit of, I don't know. I just want to do it. So it's going to be cobalt blue and white. It's the same blue I used for this guy. I think that I want some light blue in here, so teeny little areas. This is more like an embellishment to add yet another variation of color to the contours of the mountain. Also, I just feel like blue and purple look really cool together. But when you have little tiny bits that you're doing toward the end of the painting like this, you might want to use a small brush. And you might really want to think about, I was going to say, like, your paintbrush dancing around and putting little marks, but one thing you don't want to do is put it right in the middle, because that'll draw the eye to the middle. But, for example, I'm holding this at the end, and I'm looking, and I might go, oh, right there. And, like, right there could be good. Maybe right in there. And then I also know I want to cover up a good amount of this, so this might be an interesting color to bring into both the mountain and the trees and help them become one. Let little bits of that orange pop through, though. And let little bits of the blue come down into the purple. So we're breaking the ice here. If you feel like that's disconnected from the other colors, you can go ahead and add a hint of fuchsia and it'll become more of a purple. And if you also feel like it's disconnected, but you like that color in there, just add it in a few different areas. It's kind of nice to have like little repetition patterns hidden in places. Because like I said earlier, it's not about one tree, it's about the feel of a bunch of trees. I like this little vertical brush stroke reading as far away trees. And breaking up this blue or this giant purple shape in some interesting ways. You know, like trees are coming down this way, they're coming down this way. Just look at them, and if they're too spaced out, maybe overlap some of them. We don't want them to be polka dots. We want them to be, you know, a repetitious mark. Look in the middle, be like, oh, is there any bright orange left directly in the center of my painting? Is what I'm doing right now separating the whole thing? Well, I like to add a little bit of each color I use to different parts. So now the same blue is going to act as a shadow here. It's going to help me break up this shape. This green. I hate when, like, for me personally, I don't like when in my paintings I have a section that's a hill or an area of tree, but it just turns into a blob of green. So I can come in here with that blue and break that up. Honestly, it'd be good to do it with more of a fuchsia purpley color, because then you're introducing some warmth into the middle of this green. And since that's opposite, you know, warm colors are opposite. If you really liked the idea of fuchsia being in here, you could come up with maybe a subdued version of it and add some, like, little flower bits. Or just, like, something that reads flower, like I just did. Maybe you just scribble some of that fuchsia in to just break up some tree shapes. If you like your walkway orange, leave it. If you don't like your walkway orange, there's a few things you could do here. I kind of like it orange. Maybe we'll subdue that orange a bit. How do I want to do that? I'm just doing a little orange, a little white, and probably some blue on my brush. And I'm just like making it fade out to a more dull gray orange back here, so it fades out. And I might also do that a bit up front, because I don't want my eye to go straight to this. And if you feel like using that orange anywhere else, just for little bits. Go for it. Alright, so from here, guys, if you're still watching and painting along, step away from your painting. Just keep looking at it and problem solving relating to the shape of your mountain. Maybe this textured repetition pattern in there. It's kind of hard to see with my light here, so I'm going to hold it up for you guys so you can actually like maybe see it better. So I'll just take you on a tour here. This painting is going to bring you in on this path, down into the focal point. And then instead of individual trees, we have this repetition pattern that reads as trees. Trees in the distance. Get rid of this orange actually, I don't like that in there. If you don't like something, you can put a little water on a paper towel and kind of diffuse it out. Problem solving for me here, I'm seeing a white mark in the dead center of my painting that I'm not liking. See that? So I'm going to resolve that. I could sit here for hours and add more layers to this pattern thing with different variations of blues and purples and get a lot of depth in there by never covering up a layer entirely and just adding little bits. You guys could do that. If you want it to look more distant, you can gray it out by adding just a little bit of orange to your blue mixture. Help it seem distant and far, far away. And I'm also going to bring that up into this light blue that we just used. So, I don't know. For me, it's about variation, interesting shapes, the play of light and dark, warm and cool. And like toward the end, just little tiny embellishments. And contrast. You can see how dark this color is that I'm putting in right now. And watch what happens when I add a small broken line. Small little embellishments here. You can get smaller and smaller with your brush here. But yeah, if you get some of this super dark going in here, it's going to make all your snow just pop. Also depends how stylized and crazy you want to get with it, or how realistic you want to get. So, yeah, I also, something else I would do to finish this up is find ways to break this shape up so you can have some more shadowy type deals in here. Maybe with that same really dark blue we just mixed up. What else can I do here? I don't know. I just like playing with it at this later point like that. Like, you've got your main shapes in, and now if you want to break something up, embrace your scribble, play with the contrast, look at your focal point, help guide your eye in there. And just, like, let your expressive nature come through with these brush strokes toward the end. So you've got all your main shapes in there now. I just think it's really fun. It almost looks like a language of my own. As long as I don't have anything drawing my eye to the outside and I'm still working for everything to come down this path and through the mountain. I changed up my camera view and now I'm literally just holding it, so I'm sorry it's shaking, but I've got a better thing coming. Now I really like to mix up a really light green at the end when I'm working with plants like this and just get one more shade of warmth and light. Like even warmer, even lighter. Almost even just plain old yellow sometimes. Yellow and purple are complementaries. So, oh, come on. There we go. So, watch what happens when I just add a little yellow, especially right up against these purples. Might need to add a little white. Acrylics are going to dry 20% lighter than what you paint them. Oh yeah, this is like super light yellow and green. I might add it just to show you guys. Alright, something along those lines. So, the pathway brings us into the painting. We've got these interesting, repetitive marks that read faraway trees. We've got the mountain with little bits of orange popping through. We've got thicker paint on the mountain now. And we've got these green areas that we've broken up. This one, the original one, is many, 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 many layers and using this translucent medium as well, which makes it more of a transparent paint. You get a little more depth. So that's something I would do. Now that I have this, I would put a layer of that stuff on it, let it sit and dry, and then continue adding layers on. So yeah, if you guys have questions, concerns, you need help, you want to send me a picture of what you're doing, anything you want, just private message me. Add my art Facebook if you haven't. It's probably what you're watching on right now, but it's Jessica Willis Art. Here's my website if you want to see other things. And yeah, I'll try to do this again next week. We're getting really busy with work, but I'm trying my best to do it for you guys. Hey, thanks for joining. Laura, I can't wait to see what you painted. If you guys do end up painting this, please just send me a picture. I'm happy to do this free quarantine art series, and hopefully you guys can rewatch these and do them when you're bored at home. I'm getting better light and tripod situation soon, so I'll do these as often as I can, but work comes first, and my sanity and painting come second. So anyway, love y'all. Thanks for watching. Have a good Saturday night. Bye.